My name is Gail Lewis. I am 68 years old, and for the past 3 years, Maple Grove Nursing Home has been my entire world. Every morning I wake to the sound of wheels squeaking on the linoleum and the faint smell of disinfectant. The nurses are kind in their way, but they talk to us as if we were children. One leans over my bed each day and says it is time for your pills. Gail in the same tone a mother might use for a stubborn toddler. I nod because it is easier than reminding her that I managed my own medication for decades without help. The days blur together in muted shades of gray. I sit by the same window and look out at the same empty parking lot. The silence inside is broken only by a television droning in the common room and the scrape of walkers against the floor. My back aches from the hard chairs, but I do not complain anymore. Complaints only make the staff sigh and pat my hand as if I were confused. What cuts deepest is the memory of how I ended up here. 3 years ago, my son Daniel told me I was forgetful and unsafe to live alone. His wife Melissa stood beside him, lips pressed tight, nodding at every word. They said it was for my own good. They said I might leave the stove on or fail to pay the bills. The truth was simpler and crueler. $15,000 had gone missing from my savings right when Daniel needed money for a new truck. When I asked about it suddenly, I was no longer sharp. I was no longer capable. I was simply confused. I know what it feels like to be a burden. Melissa once pulled me aside after my grandson's birthday party. I had saved for months to buy him a bicycle. His face had lit up, but Melissa scolded me later. She said I made them look bad because they could not afford gifts like that. I only wanted him to be happy. She twisted it into selfishness as if my love were a crime. That memory still burns more painful than any ache in my body. Time in Maple Grove moves slowly. Each day is a repeat of the last, and I measure them not by hours, but by the rare visits that break the monotony. In 3 years, Daniel and Melissa have come only a handful of times. Their children barely know me anymore. Most nights I sit alone and wonder how a mother can become invisible to her own family. One afternoon, a nurse named Claire came to my chair and said someone wanted to see me. Her voice carried a softness I was not used to. She told me a lawyer named Barry was waiting in the conference room. My heart skipped. No one comes to see me except the occasional church volunteer. I walked slowly down the hall, each step echoing in the empty corridor. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper. A man in a dark suit rose as I entered, his face solemn. He introduced himself as Barry and told me he represented the estate of my brother Thomas. For a moment, the words did not make sense. Thomas had been distant for years, and now Barry was telling me he had died. My chest tightened with grief and regret. Then Barry unfolded papers from his briefcase. He said Thomas had left me a ranch in Montana, 1,800 acres of land that had been in our family for decades. Along with it came a fortune in investments carefully saved over a lifetime. The world tilted as I tried to grasp what he was saying. For years I had been made to feel like I had nothing left to offer. Now I was being told that my brother believed I deserved more than the life I had been given. It was too much to take in. As Barry finished, the door opened suddenly. Daniel and Melissa stepped inside, faces arranged in masks of concern. Daniel rushed forward with a rehearsed look of worry. Melissa hovered close, her eyes darting toward the stack of papers on the table. They spoke quickly, insisting they had come to support me, but I knew better. I could see the gleam in their eyes, not of love, but of calculation. In that moment, I understood that this inheritance was about to change everything, not only for me, but for them as well. Barry's voice carried a weight that filled the small conference room. He told me my brother Thomas had lived simply on the surface, but had quietly built a fortune. I blinked hard as he read the will. Thomas had left me a ranch of 1,800 acres in Montana, along with $7.2 million in carefully chosen investments. The words seemed to echo against the walls, too large to fit into the life I had been forced into. I sat stiffly, my hands gripping the table while Barry's tone softened. He explained that Thomas had trusted him for many years and had been very clear about his wishes. The ranch had been in our family for generations. Thomas had kept it going through grit and discipline, even as he pretended to live modestly in town. His will was not just about land and money. It was about recognition. It was about finally giving me something no one else had ever given me: security and respect. Barry reached into his folder and slid a sealed envelope across the table. My name was written in my brother's familiar handwriting. My breath caught as I broke the seal and unfolded the pages inside. The letter began simply with my name. He admitted his regret that pride and distance had kept us apart in recent years. He reminded me of the nights when our father's temper raged, and it was me who shielded him, me who got him to school on time, me who gave him the kind of care he never forgot. He said I had been more of a parent to him than either of our parents ever were. I felt the words blur as tears filled my eyes. He wrote that he had always planned for the ranch to be ours together, but let anger push him to keep it for himself. He confessed he was wrong and that he should have reached out sooner. He told me I deserved better than what life had given me, and that this inheritance was his way of making sure I could live the rest of my years on my own terms. I pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes, hearing his voice as if he were in the room. Barry gave me time before speaking again. His tone grew steady, almost protective. He explained that Thomas had thought carefully about how to guard me from harm. The fortune was placed in a trust designed so no one could take advantage of me, not even if someone tried to pressure me or claim I was incapable of making decisions. The funds could only be used for my benefit, my home, my care, my choices. Thomas had anticipated the dangers of manipulation and had sealed every door against it. For years, I had been made to feel small, like a woman who needed to be managed, a woman whose judgment could not be trusted. Now I held in my hands the evidence that my brother had seen the truth. He had known my worth even when my own family dismissed me. My chest ached with grief for the years we lost, but also with a new and unfamiliar strength. For the first time in a long while, I felt the possibility of freedom. I folded the letter carefully, tracing my name on the envelope once more. Barry's eyes met mine, calm and steady, as if waiting to see whether I believed it was real. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The burden of being cast aside began to loosen, replaced by a flicker of dignity I thought was gone forever. I realized that I was not powerless. I was not broken. My brother's words had given me permission to want more, to demand more, to live, as though I was worth more. And maybe, just maybe, it was not too late to begin again. Barry's expression grew heavier as he placed a second folder on the table. He explained that Thomas had suspected my son and his wife for years. Inside were copies of bank slips with my signature forged. One withdrawal slip showed $20,000 taken from my account. The handwriting was sloppy and the signature did not match, yet the bank had accepted it. There were also photocopies of my old house deed, where Melissa's name had been slipped in near the end of my father's life. I felt my stomach twist as Barry played a short audio file. It was Melissa's voice on the phone with the nursing home director. She described me as paranoid, confused, and unable to manage my own bills. I sat frozen as she painted me as a woman slipping into dementia. The betrayal was a knife turning in my chest. For 3 years I had doubted myself. I wondered if I really had been forgetful or careless. Now I saw the truth in black and white. My own child and his wife had been plotting against me, stripping away not only my savings, but my dignity. Barry touched the papers gently and told me that Thomas had insisted this evidence be preserved in case I ever needed to defend myself. Later that week, Daniel and Melissa insisted we meet at a cafe in town. The place was nearly empty, the clink of cups loud in the silence between us. Melissa leaned forward with that practiced smile, saying they only wanted what was best for me. Daniel's eyes stayed fixed on the papers in my hand. I listened quietly until Melissa repeated that I was confused about finances, that they only meant to protect me. Something inside me snapped. I said, "I'm not confused. I am angry." The words came out steady and sharp. Their faces froze as if they had never heard me raise my voice before. Melissa tried to recover, saying I was imagining things. Daniel leaned closer, lowering his tone. He warned me that without their help, I would die alone, in some far corner, helpless and forgotten. His words were meant to scare me into surrender. Instead, they made everything clear. My son did not see me as his mother. He saw me as a problem to be managed and a wallet to be drained. I looked at them both and felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. I saw the truth written in their eyes, the hunger for control and the fear of losing it. In that cafe, surrounded by the bitter smell of coffee and the cold gleam of metal chairs, I understood what Thomas had tried to give me. He had given me proof, but more than that, he had given me back my voice. I no longer had to doubt who I was or what I knew. For the first time in years, I believed myself again, and nothing they said could take that away. The morning I left Maple Grove, the sky was pale blue and the air held a sharp chill. I packed the few belongings I had into 2 small suitcases. As the car pulled away, I looked back once at the gray building that had caged me. It had been my prison, but also the place where I finally learned what my son thought of me. Now it was behind me, replaced by open road and the hum of the engine carrying me west. The landscape changed mile by mile. Cornfields gave way to hills, and then the mountains rose, capped with streaks of snow that glittered in sunlight. Streams cut through valleys, and cattle grazed in wide pastures. I pressed my hand against the glass, feeling something stir inside me. It was as if the land itself whispered that I still had time, that I still had worth. When we reached the ranch, my breath caught. The house stood on a gentle rise, its logs warm with age, a stone chimney lifting toward the sky. Barns and fences stretched across rolling hills. A stream wound through cottonwoods, flashing gold in the afternoon light. Harold and Maggie Cooper waited on the porch, faces, weathered eyes kind. Maggie hugged me as if I were her own, and Harold's handshake carried the strength of a man who had worked the land his whole life. Inside the house smelled faintly of wood smoke. A solid oak table anchored the kitchen, and shelves of books lined the living room. I paused at the window where sunlight streamed across counters worn smooth with use. For the first time in years, I imagined belonging somewhere. The days that followed were filled with lessons. Harold walked me through pastures, explaining how cattle rotated to keep the grass strong. Maggie showed me the root cellar and the garden Thomas had insisted on planting every summer. I scribbled notes in a little book: how to check a fence line, how to judge a healthy calf, how to keep water flowing clear. My hands ached each evening, but it was the ache of purpose, not neglect. Barry arrived a week later with papers. He explained the ranch not only covered its costs, but had turned a profit every year. He showed me the investments Thomas had left, each chosen with care. As I signed the documents, I realized I no longer needed anyone's permission. I was the one in charge, now guarded by the trust Thomas had built, but even more by my own will. One afternoon, Maggie brought me an envelope. The handwriting was uneven, a child's. Inside was a drawing from my granddaughter Lily, a little house with flowers, stick figures holding hands, and the words, "I love you, Grandma," in bold letters. My throat tightened as I traced the paper. For 3 years, Melissa had kept them from me, insisting I was too confused to be trusted. Yet this small drawing broke through every wall. That night, I asked Barry to set up a scholarship fund for Lily and my grandson Evan. The money would go directly to them when they turned 18, beyond the reach of their parents. As I signed the papers, I thought of the bicycle I once gave Evan, the gift Melissa said was too much. This time there would be no argument. My love would outlast their control. Life at the ranch reshaped me. I woke with the sun, sipped coffee on the porch, and listened to cattle in the fields. The air smelled of hay and earth, not bleach and medicine. At night the fire crackled in the hearth instead of televisions buzzing in the distance. My back grew straighter, my laugh returned, and I found myself humming while planting in the garden. The drawing from Lily stayed on the mantel. Each time I passed it, tears threatened, but so did hope. My grandchildren had not forgotten me. In their voices, in their scribbled letters, I found proof that love survives even through betrayal. As I stood on the porch watching the Montana sky spread wide and golden, I understood. I was no longer living the life others forced on me. I was living mine. The knock on the door came late in the evening as the sun dropped behind the Montana hills. I opened it to see Daniel standing on the porch, thinner than I remembered, his shoulders slumped. His eyes carried the weight of defeat. He told me his job was gone. His marriage had ended, and he had nowhere left to turn. For a moment I saw the boy he used to be, but then I remembered the choices that brought us here. He asked me for help. His voice cracked as he said he could not manage alone. I listened quietly, letting his words fall into the space between us. I told him that family is not blood. Family is respect. The silence after those words seemed to stretch forever. I invited him inside, but only to share a simple meal. I set a plate at the table and told him he was welcome to eat as a guest, not as family. Daniel sat for a few minutes pushing food around his plate. His hands trembled, and he did not look me in the eye. When he finally rose, he thanked me in a voice barely above a whisper. He left without protest, his footsteps fading into the night. I watched from the doorway as he walked down the gravel road, his figure shrinking against the wide sky. For the first time, I sensed real regret in him, not spoken, but carried in the way he lowered his head and did not look back. A year passed, and the ranch had become more than land to me. It was proof that I could build a life on my own terms. One afternoon, Barry called with quiet news. My foundation had received a donation of $40,000. The name was hidden, but the handwriting on the check was not. It was Daniel's. For a long while I stood at the porch, railing the check in my hand, and felt something soften inside me. He was not forgiven, not yet, but he was beginning to change. That evening, I walked into the garden with shears and bent to cut a single white rose. Its petals were wide open, glowing in the soft light. I held it to my chest and thought about how many years I had spent fearing loneliness. The truth was clearer now. Being alone is not the worst fate. Being with those who do not value you. I set the rose in a vase on the porch table and watched the sun dip behind the mountains. The sky burned with color streaks of orange and violet across the horizon. The cattle moved slowly in the pasture, their silhouettes black against the light. I breathed deep and felt peace settle into my bones. This was the ending I never expected, but it was mine. If this story has given you courage to set a boundary of your own, subscribe and share it. Comment the city you are watching from so I can see how far this story travels.